Today, we have a very special topic. So we're going to be focusing on women in venture capital. So far, we've helped hundreds of women launch VC firms all around the world. Our overall community of emerging VCs is made up of 27% of women, which is far higher than the industry average at this stage. And we're super excited, but we want to do more. So what we've done is that we have launched the Female Venture 50 initiative, which is our kind of goal at Decile Group to get this to 50%. And we were so excited because with cohort 10, which is the last program that has completed, we had 40% of firms in the program that had at least one female GP. So we were incredibly excited about that. And today, to talk to you about being a woman in venture capital, we have an amazing panel with us. But before, we kind of jump to introductions, I do have to read a disclaimer, so please bear with me. So the content presented today is not directed to any investor or potential investor. It does not constitute an offer to sell or solicitation of an offer to buy any securities. So with that out of the way, let's jump over to introduce our guest today. So we have Didem Altop from Treeo VC and Genevieve LeMarchal from Suncoast Ventures. So Didem, maybe let's start with you. Do you mind introducing yourself?
So my name is Didem Altop. Again, I'm a general partner together at Treeo VC with two other female co-founders, actually, Didem Toraman and Arzu Tekir. I've been involved in the entrepreneurship space for the past 25 years. I'm actually Turkish American, so I was born and raised in the United States, but I've been living in Turkey for the past 25 years. And 25 years ago, when I got to Turkey, I got involved in building the local entrepreneurship ecosystem. It started first with high impact entrepreneurship, and then it also expanded into social entrepreneurship through Endeavor Turkey, as well as Ashoka Turkey, where I was a co-founding board member for both. And it's really interesting, we started off with these acceleration programs, but obviously when you're building an ecosystem, one key component of that is access to capital, whether it's angel capital or venture capital. And I can share a little bit more about how we were able to spark the movement of angel capital and venture capital in a new country, in an emerging market at the time, but that's how I got involved in this space.
Amazing. Over to you, Genevieve.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I don't have the standard trajectory for how I got involved. And as I've been in this industry for years now, I found there is no one typical story. But I would say I started out in another ecosystem that was not a hotbed or epicenter of startup and venture capital, which was Portland, Oregon, the Pacific Northwest. Of course, entrepreneurial activity, but it's not one of the centers for VC, and started getting involved. And I just found myself always very inspired and driven by entrepreneurs. I myself was an entrepreneur for many years before I became a VC. I had some successes, and actually what propelled me into venture was a series of things that occurred, but it all started with a big failure of a company, and just something that I thought was career ending and crippling for me, but it ended up propelling me into venture capital a couple of years later. So I've had a wild journey to come here. There is no typical path. I studied journalism in school and fully intended to be a writer. I didn't want to study business. I never thought I would get into finance. It just wasn't something that I was interested in. But as I began to allow myself to follow my passion, this is where I ended up. So yeah.
I love that so much. And Genevieve, what are you doing now? Can you tell us anything you can about your involvement in VC?
So, so you started off, of course, dabbling and in different funds, helping out, anything but what would be constituted as a formal role. Now I am the managing partner of Suncoast Ventures, and Suncoast is healthcare technology, but we invest pretty diversely. We do some med tech, specific types of devices. Of course, that encompasses digital health, healthcare tech. We've even opportunistically done some select therapeutics. And I like to classify the types of investments, the things that we get excited about, as impact investing, which to us means sectors of health that are massively underserved, don't have a lot of innovation in them historically, and have a lot of space for serving populations of people, types of diseases, illnesses, indications that have previously been overlooked. So we get pretty excited about that.
I love that. I love that. And Didem, do you mind sharing a little bit about how you got into venture capital?
So I had mentioned before that we were building ecosystems, and I kind of feel like it's the Big Bang theory of ecosystem development, right? So two nonprofit organizations, Endeavor is a global organization. I launched the Endeavor Turkey chapter, and Ashoka is a social impact organization. And at the very, very beginning of this Big Bang theory, we were having difficulty in this emerging market distinguishing between small and medium-sized enterprise and entrepreneurs that are built to scale, using and leveraging innovation and technology. So both of those programs started off as mentorship and acceleration programs. Actually, we didn't want to scare people off with the idea of investing, so we called it mentor capital at first, knowing full well that the more mentors started to get to know these companies and their products, their services, their teams, and their ability to add value to them, that they were going to increase their appetite for investing as well. So very quickly, over time, the mentors in our network started advocating for us to help them structure angel investment networks and venture capital networks. And I think it was the birth of a whole ecosystem, essentially, that came out of those activities. And when I'm looking at it from my original point of view and thesis of, theory of change, I think entrepreneurship itself entrepreneurial activity is one of the best economic development activities you can do in any country, in any city, in any region, in any sector even, right? And then being able to develop an ecosystem around that just adds value, and everybody wins. People get to do a little good, have a little fun, and make a little money, right? So it's all those things all together. A lot of the angel networks and venture capital groups from Turkey spun out of the activities we were doing for Endeavor Turkey and for Ashoka Turkey. And I was involved in a lot of trainings and workshops and activities and really mobilizing the ecosystem to get organized. And now for my own personal career, like the next step actually is to get on the other side of the table. And while we're supporting entrepreneurs, it's really to be able to add a component of access to capital directly. We're working today with my colleagues on globalizing Turkish tech companies, specifically in the US market. So it's going to be a really interesting opportunity. We have two different archetypes of companies, which I think is really interesting. There's the Turkish talent in Turkey, but the tremendous market opportunities in the United States, and being able to match those is one archetype. And the second archetype is there really amazing talent in the universities doing research and development through grants with pilot projects that are ready to commercialize. And all of those, both types, need access to networks as well as to capital. So really, it's the go-to-market strategy, the access to the networks, and then the access to capital that we're going to be helping them with.
I love that so much. Thank you, Didem. Genevieve, I did want to kind of pass over to you here because, you started off with a very different kind of background. You studied journalism. But I think it's really interesting because you still use your writing today.
Yes.
You do a lot of content creation. You have a podcast. And so can you tell us a little bit about how, what role content creation plays in your career as a VC right now?
Yeah, actually, that's a great question. So I wasn't strategic about it when I first decided to do it. It's just when you are an entrepreneur, which, all of us are, we just aren't making a product. Our product is entrepreneurs. Or when you're doing something, you have to do it. You can't not. And so, I'll tell people a lot of times whether they're thinking of starting a startup, they're thinking of starting a VC fund, or they're thinking of writing a book or creating something, it has to be so much a part of you that if you don't do it, like a piece of you will die. And so that's how I am as a writer. And it's been interesting because I originally started to write because I started to write Adventurous. My podcast is a book, which I hope to publish next year, because I just had to start writing. I needed a creative outlet. I was fundraising. I was in this very linear, very difficult time. And I really wanted something out over here that I could kind of flow some of my creative energies into and have some of that sort of release. And so I started it that way. But also the evolution that I went through, for me, it's becoming this, was it was a spiritual journey in a lot of ways. It was full of personal growth. It was full of a lot of difficulty. And I really felt like when I had that opportunity to start to share that with people, that it helped people. And I just thought, I kind of want to tell this story. So I started to write, and then I started to want to tell other people's stories. So I started doing the podcast, and the podcast has more of an immediate gratification. You get to publish, you get to create, and then you get to, move on to kind of the next story. And I really liked being able to do that. So as a content creator who also is in VC, one of the things I found is, because I am writing a lot about values ultimately and what I believe, it helps me connect with entrepreneurs, LPs, and people in the ecosystem in a different way than I might otherwise be able to if I was just like, pitching. And so people can, it's very accessible out there, on the internet, on, Apple Podcasts or whatever, who I am and therefore who we are and what we stand for. And so I started to think, maybe if I just put this out there a little bit more, even at times when it felt uncomfortable, I will attract, for lack of a better term, the tribe. I know that's overused, who belongs with us and who wants to be a part of this. And some people really resonate and some people don't. And that's what it's meant to do. So.
That's amazing. And Didem, you're a co-founder of an organization called Yeninten Biz that helps professional women refresh and redefine their careers after taking time off. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about that, as well as what inspired you to launch this organization.
I mean, your Turkish is really good, by the way. Congratulations. Well, first of all, I'm just going to mention to Genevieve really quickly that she literally hit the nail on the head. There's a difference between being inspired by something, like we can all be inspired by many, many things, but being compelled to act the way that she has, it's when there's something unique that you're uniquely qualified to do about it that makes you compelled to act. She even used the word, like, if I don't do this, I'm going to die. It's like your brain is going to explode if you don't move on it. So I think that actually is the secret to all types of entrepreneurial activity. Like, what compels people to move forward is that specific, unique proposition that there's something you can do about it specifically. Which brings me back to Yeninten Biz. So while I was working with Endeavor and Ashoka Fellows, the entrepreneurs, we could see that as they were building their teams, they needed C-level expertise. It was beyond mentoring, right? They needed people on their team, and they were scaling really quickly and they were growing really fast. And then there was this other community of women that I had kept running across who had taken time off either to have families or to take care of a loved one, or maybe put their husband's career first and they were on a back burner for a moment. Really talented, well-educated people who were trying to get back into their career force. So we thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could create this bridge between the entrepreneurship ecosystem and this fractional C-suite of professional women and help them get back into their career modes. And that's really how a group of us came together. There was a group of, there's a group called Turkish Women's International, who had a huge pool of women essentially sharing stories as a sisterhood in terms of collaborating their career journeys. Then we had Egon Zander, which is an executive search company. So they had keen insight on executive recruiting. And then there was us representing the entrepreneurship space, so the potential client or customer. We came together to form Unidad Biz, and now there's a flex time program for C-level executives. There's part-time project-based leadership opportunities. There's training programs. There's even a new returnship program that we've launched, but it's a beautiful platform for women who want to get back into the career mode after they've taken a leave of absence. And it's really hard. It's always about networks. Like when you skip a beat and you're out of that network, you lose confidence, you lose your bearings, you need to catch up. And this platform provides an opportunity for everybody to gain momentum and build confidence and do that catching up as well.
I love that so much. And I love how it's kind of, another puzzle piece of everything that you've done that has led you into venture capital in a way. So you're kind of, combining everything so well to build, your career to where you are today. And you both have done so much. I mean, I was looking at your LinkedIn's and, I was amazed at all the things that you had done. And I wanted to ask you, because you're both incredibly successful, if you kind of look back at your careers, what would you say is the one thing that you would attribute the majority of your success as a VC? What would that one thing be?
Oh God.
Start with whoever's ready.
Good one. Go for it, Genevieve.
Okay. I think the first of all, I don't know, but I think what I will say is it was failing and coming back from that. Because I had a startup that was very important to me, and of course, and it meant a lot. And when it didn't work out for many reasons, that was an extremely difficult time, personally and professionally. And what I took away from that at the end of the day was a lot of wisdom. I think it wisened me up, wisdom wise by decades. So even though, I didn't necessarily have the years on, of expertise, and I am a little older than I look, but I had the wisdom to advise entrepreneurs and founders who had beyond just surface strategies in business. And so I suddenly found that I could become a very, very a different type of mentor and advisor than I might have otherwise been had I had not been through some of that experience. And so that wasn't the thing that propelled me into venture capital. There was a couple other key points, but it was something that I knew right away and immediately began to see that I could be different than some of the other mentors and some of the other VCs that were out there.
And I mean, I'll just dovetail, and you used the word tribe before, Genevieve, but for me, the word tribe is actually really important. I think growing up Turkish and American, like being split between two cultures and being a third culture kid, when I lived in America, I was born and raised in America. When I lived in America, I felt really Turkish, but out of place. And then I went and lived in Turkey for 25 years. And there I felt really American and out of place. So for me, my whole life has always been about building tribes, whether it's, and I think that, venture capital in and of itself is also a form of entrepreneurship, right? You're bringing together a group of people and resources for a common goal. So if that's the definition of entrepreneurship, venture capital is just one other manifestation of that. But for me, building a tribe actually means bringing people around a common goal and then creating these environments of trust, adding on stakeholders that typically aren't necessarily talking to each other, but once they do, you create like magic. So it was a personal need that I had to fulfill to keep building these tribes, whether it was launching a new nonprofit organization, launching a new company, or launching a new venture capital fund. And in this case, I have the opportunity to work with two other brilliant minds. So the three of us came together around this common goal where we felt that we had each unique capabilities that we could add towards a common goal. And now we're trying to recruit other stakeholders into the mix. So venture capital is very, very exciting, very interesting space to be in.
Yeah, yeah, and very kind of multifaceted in terms of the skills and the background that can help you in that career move. And everyone here, by the way, we have a set of questions that we're gonna kind of ask Didem and Genevieve, but you can also ask your questions. Please make sure you do that in the Q&A section of Zoom, not the chat. And please go ahead and upvote the questions that resonate with you and that you'd like to ask these absolute powerhouses in VC. So, we want to make this interactive. My next question is around, so obviously venture capital is still not a very diverse sector. It's very male dominated. What's it been like for you being women in VC?
Genevieve, I'll let you go first again, if you're okay.
I would say, I mean, being a woman in VC, it's already fraught with, women already suffer a lot from imposter syndrome. And we also, there's not just that within ourselves, which is stronger than what we might receive from anyone else. But then, there's the fact that just externally and systemically, without even realizing it, there's a lot of unconscious bias towards women, whether people realize it or not. And so I think that the first thing to do is to make sure when you're coming into a world such as this one, that you have some of that inner resilience, because you will face it. And then be really, really clear about who you are, because you're going to have to remind yourself, and other people around you are going to also have to remind you who you are, because there's going to be times it's really difficult, and you will forget, and you need to be kind of taken back to that. What one of my friends who's a GP, Alicia Hamp, calls your last known point. And so those are two things I would say as a woman, I find different than as a man, then women, oftentimes when we start to talk with each other in this industry, we start to get into these conversations that are extremely, extremely encouraging. And it's like, girl, you got this. I know you have it. You don't see it right now, but I'm there for you. And, and it's like, you find those tribes within the tribe and the community. And that's one of the reasons that I love VC Lab so much, is because I found a lot of that here. It was something so valuable. So I would say, as a woman, be ready to experience those things, and be ready to go back to that core of who you know yourself to be, despite what other people may say or what you may say to yourself.
From our side, I think the fact that we're 3 women GPs that came together, that was serendipitous. It wasn't deliberate, right? We didn't say, oh, let's find 3 women and come together as female VCs. But when we did come together and realize that it was 3 women VCs that could be a powerhouse, that just added more joy to the endeavor, right? So we were already excited about it. And then that was like the icing on the cake for us. All 3 of us come from a background of running acceleration programs and management consulting, which for us internally we had to change gears, because when you're coming from an acceleration program background where you're running an acceleration program, it's all about the entrepreneur and helping the entrepreneur. But when you're on the VC side, you have to say no to a lot of people. And it's not necessarily about helping the entrepreneur at that point. Of course it is. But at the end of the day, you also have this fiduciary obligation to support your investors, right? So some of the LPs who, especially gentlemen LPs, when we're creating our case for support or so, we're questioning that. They're like, are you going to be tough enough to be able to say no or to make the big calls? So that was one question we've had to consistently overcome. The second part of it is probably our own filters. I think once upon a time, I did a research study on women entrepreneurship and some of the mental paradigm barriers that they had for themselves. And it was interesting because the question is that one theme that kept coming up was, although they might have a lot of people in their network, addressing their network for a new business opportunity and for a financial investment felt awkward. I was like, this is your business, this is your social network. Why would you talk business with them?
Mhm.
It's always easy for me to talk to my business network on behalf of other people, but when I had to do it on behalf of something that I was building, I had to create a new paradigm, because then it went from, I'm not selling something, I'm inviting people to be part of a journey. And when I made that switch mentally, and the same goes for my colleagues as well, you'll remember through VC Lab with Adea saying, burn your bridges, right? Being able to go and knock on doors and being able to talk to people about this opportunity, asking them to be part of this journey, being okay with them saying no, and not feeling like you've just ruined a friendship or a relationship was a mental barrier that I had to overcome. But I think that I'm growing more resilient, as Genevieve said, and we have our own soft power. It doesn't have to be the same as how men do it. We can do it in our own way.
No, absolutely. And I want to also come back to something Genevieve said about, kind of creating those spaces where you can kind of retreat back to as a woman. You're kind of understood, and, you can almost recharge a little bit, or you can kind of see that it's kind of the environment creating this. It's not you, it's them, and you're going to be okay, and you just need to push through this. And at VC Lab, we've run these sessions a few times where we bring the women in our VC community together, and we kind of talk. So one person goes up and they're like, oh, this is a challenge, or this is kind of something I've had to face being a woman in the sector. And then we have all the other women just kind of responding to that and addressing it and saying, oh, I've been in exactly the same situation, and this is how I addressed it, or this is what worked, or this is what didn't work. And, women have found this really useful. And for the benefit of the women here, I'd love to kind of recreate this on a much smaller kind of scale. And I would love to ask you both, if you can think of a challenging situation that you had to face being a woman in this space, and how you dealt with it, so that you can kind of, maybe it'll resonate with some people in the audience. And Didem, do you want to go first?
I mean, it was kind of goes back to what I just mentioned before. There are people who are wondering if I can be teethy enough, right? Like to be able to say no or to say yes, instead of being always so helpful. Because as an accelerator, you're all about being helpful. And here you're still being helpful, but you're also being a little bit more deliberate about the choices that you make and where you're spending your time, your money, and your attention. So being able to persuade with a high level of confidence to the potential LP that, yes, we've got this figured out, and we're there, we can do it. We're not going to be pushovers. We can make the tough calls, has been a challenge. I mean, fortunately, hasn't been as much of a challenge as I thought it was going to be, but it has been a challenge. Like that's the one thing that keeps popping up. I think there's an undertone of that. So they're wondering if we're up to the task, and I think we're proving that we are.
Exactly. And it's always a bit easier than what you have it in your head.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, that's the other thing too. Like what you think is going to be such a trauma, when you deal with it and face it, confront it head on, then you're able to come up with solutions and challenges and fine tune your response. And I think that the word response is also important too, like reacting versus responding. No matter what happens, if you take a beat and are able to respond mindfully as opposed to react, I think that makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah. And I was talking to a girlfriend of mine the other day, and she was saying, my counselor told me the difference between fear and anxiety. And fear is you're avoiding something that can happen because you've experienced it before. And anxiety is you're avoiding something that you're imagining how bad it is. But most of the time it's a lot better than you actually think. And it's just about kind of facing it, and in a mindful way, as you said, tackling it head on. Genevieve, is there a particular situation that you'd be happy to share?
Yeah, I think I'll play a little bit off of your response. Coming from an accelerator as well, I think you're not only is your role to help, but I think when you love, you have a passion for what you do, you have a passion for entrepreneurs, you want to help. And so you get to a point in venture where you cannot, one, because of your fiduciary responsibility to produce returns, but two, because the volume of inbound that you suddenly get as soon as you slap venture capital on your profile becomes untenable. And I think we have the added kind of, as women, we live in an interesting world where we often face juxtaposition. So on one hand, we're told, be nice. So there's that whole help, wanting to be helpful, helping, wanting to contribute side. But then on the other side, we have to sometimes be tough and be very frank and make hard decisions and make hard calls and do things for the business and for the portfolio that may not feel great and fuzzy and warm in the moment. And, I've gotten pushback, not just from, people external to us, but also, internally about being too hard, too tough, too this, too that, and it can be really frustrating because you're like, I can't win, I can't be nice, I can't be tough, and you just have, I think that's where it comes back down to just knowing that you're kind of signing up for it in a lot of ways. It is what it is. And, one of the things that motivates me and inspires me is, we're not just trying to create a better world in terms of making investments in companies that the world actually needs, but we're also trying to create a better world for the next generation of women who come, who maybe will not have to go through some of this stuff that we did because our parents and grandparents did some work to allow us to even be able to do this today. So that's something too that I like to think about from time to time to make me feel better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Genevieve, you just spoke about, putting VC on your profile and kind of the amount of inbound that you get. Do you guys think, so kind of from the founder perspective, what do you guys think is the benefit of having of founders having women as their investors? Is there kind of something that you'd like to that you've observed from that perspective and kind of the benefit from because we always talk about venture capital and VCs have to be diverse and so on and so forth, but what do you think that's like from a founder's perspective?
I think for founders, for one, it probably might depend on the industry. So I'll just speak from health. For founders, it's always a red flag when you see a pitch deck full of, a single type of person, and they're addressing problems in health specifically for either a large population of people or a type of person who they are not, and you see, and, over time, many years and watching companies and things like that, thousands of companies, you do learn to do some pattern matching a little bit and see that these types of companies tend to have certain trajectories. And so I would say a lot of the time I do find it a little of a red flag when someone doesn't have any female investors or representation on their cap table, because I'm like, well, why? And usually the answer I get is unsatisfactory, which is like, oh, we just haven't found anyone. And I'm like, I don't think that's why, and so, and so I think when you have, I think Suncoast is a prime example of this. We do not have a diversity investing lens. We don't have a gender lens, but we have incredible diversity numbers. And I think that's because like attracts like, and when you have diversity of thought and diversity of experience and expertise, you bring in more interesting and diverse opportunities. And as an investor, diversity leads to a well-diversified portfolio, which leads to resilience and performance, which is ultimately what we're looking for. So, that's another reason I might look to a startup's team, board, cap table. If it's very homogenous, I would say there's not a lot of resilience. And I would question their ability to for performance and over their long term, because they're not seeing around different corners and they don't know all the contexts. They only know maybe one context.
Absolutely. What do you think, Didem?
Well, I mean, Genevieve nailed it again when she said like attracts like. Like we were three women who created Treeo VC, and we didn't necessarily have a diversity lens, although we knew by default that we would be diverse. Like it was just a given for us at that point. But it just so turns out that 45% of our LPs right now happen to be female. And, you know, again, it wasn't a deliberate intention, but like attracts like, and, you know, we opened those doors for people as we were presenting to our networks who happen to have a large degree of women in them. And now all of a sudden there's this other chain reaction that's happening. When it comes to the entrepreneurs and the other community, like men versus women and diversity in terms of leadership roles, you know, obviously we shouldn't be stereotyping or generalizing or whatnot, but there are two types of brains, right? There's the linear brain, and then there's the systems brain. And, you know, if one is yin and the other one is yang, you need both. So I think that that male and female yin and yang, the linear thinking for critical paths versus the systems thinking, you know, the cause effect relationships, etc. You just need those perspectives. And I think that having women involved brings that additional perspective, which also highlights lots of opportunities.
Absolutely. And I love that you touched up on LPs a little bit, because if we have an issue in diversity on the VC level, the issue is double or if not triple on the LP level. So we don't know exactly the figure, but you know, it is estimated that about 5% of all LPs in venture capital fund are women, which is embarrassingly low. And so I wanted to kind of get your take from the inside. You know, do you see that women are more and more interested in VC as an asset class? Has this been changing? You know, what's the relationship of women as LPs into venture capital?
So I have over 35% LPs that are women in my fund. And so I still like kind of fall back on the like attracts like thing. However, I have gotten interested recently in just kind of looking at the relationship of women in general to investing and money in general. And women have different mindsets and approaches to investing and to money than men do. And it's, you know, you tend to find women be a little bit more conservative, and you tend to find women be a little bit more, you know, I would say like they take a little bit longer. Maybe like risk aversion might be a good like description for that. But what I would say is it's still like attracts like, and so if women feel that you are aligned with their values, and if they want to be a part of it, they will invest. And for me, especially with Fund One, you know, I care a little less about the numbers of check size than I care about the people and who they are. And so, you know, I'm very fortunate to have that many women. But I would also say that, you know, it's like a lot of the women who are in the fund because a man invited them to join it. And that's something that I really feel has been a theme in my career is, you know, as a woman, I've been given a lot of opportunities, and some of those pivotal opportunities that I received were because there was a man who said, you deserve this opportunity, because I didn't necessarily recognize that for myself. And they said, you belong at this table, or, you know, I'm going to give you this role, you know, and I was like, who, me, you know, little old me. So I still think that, you know, men play a very, very, very important role in equity, which is, you know, ensuring that doors are opened and pointing out to women when they're maybe not raising their hand or stepping up and they should be. And if it weren't for those few men in my fund, I wouldn't have the numbers of women LPs that I have.
Yeah, that just reminded me of a very interesting perspective. Like when you're looking at a job description, for example, we see, again, I'm generalizing, but a man might, you know, cover 50% of the job and say, hey, I can do that. But if a woman only covers 80% of the job, she's like, oh, I'm falling behind 20%. So there's that perfectionism, I guess, of women as well, as a generalization. That's quite interesting. when you're looking at it that way.
Yeah.
I love that. Should we head over to answer some of the audience's questions? They've been flooding in, and there's some really good ones. So I'm going to start with the one that has the most upvotes, and it's by Sorcha. So thanks, Sorcha, for your question. And she's asking, or he, I'm really sorry, I'm not sure where the name comes from, but what was the moment where you recognized yourselves as GPs, that you were successful and that you could now shake off your imposter syndrome? Was there a moment for you both there?
Absolutely. From my point of view, as running an accelerator for 15 years, and then my colleagues also ran one for 10 years, another one for 7. If we had invested in any of the companies that we supported hands-on, we would have been billionaires by now. So like when you look back retroactively and say, hey, we created this program, we handheld, we nurtured, we guided, we did all the things, but we didn't put capital behind the activities that we were pursuing. And then you see the opportunity cost of missing out on that. I think that was a big epiphany, because we have some really great success stories from our previous careers. So that was one part of it, perhaps.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think, sometimes I have to remind myself of some of those things I've done in the past, because you kind of get stuck in that whole like, oh, I'm nobody, I'm little old me. I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I'm not a doctor. I don't have a background in medicine. I don't have a PhD. And that was a big thing for me for a long time to overcome. I was doing venture capital, but not necessarily in the health space. I wanted to do something that I felt was really impactful. And so it was sort of this thing I kind of kept to myself, that I would love to be in a space. And, I wanted to be doing something more than just like, general enterprise SaaS and things like that. Not that that's not great, but I really wanted to invest in health or energy or something like that. But I had no background in it. And so I think I told myself for a long time, but just because I didn't have the education didn't mean that I didn't have the expertise and a very, very important skill sets that entrepreneurs in that space needed. And once I realized that people who have PhDs, backgrounds in medicine, engineers, all these things, don't need another PhD with a background in medicine who is an engineer to help them make their innovation successful and take it to market. They need an entrepreneur. And I realized if I just really dedicate myself to one, understanding the unique journey and gap that these types of entrepreneurs are facing, going from, bench to bedside, for lack of a better term, or if I find the right people who believe in the mission, then I can listen to them, I can take their advice, and I can learn. And then I don't have to be a doctor. And in fact, it's better that I'm not. And so I think that was a big, and that didn't happen overnight. I had to see, people who had the experience in the industry, extremely talented engineers, kind of rally to our mission and believe in it. And I could say, I joke, I'm the resident VC. And I'll tell entrepreneurs all the time, you don't really need me, well, I'll help you get your deals done. And, I'll help you with your cap table, your capital stack, your fundraising, and advising and mentorship, just as you learn how to become a CEO and a leader of a small enterprise. I can help with that. And that's very, very valuable to them. And they don't need me to have, regulatory expertise at the FDA. So I know enough now to know how to vet deals, but I by no means do due diligence alone. And 70% of our LP base are health industry execs with deep, deep expertise their entire career. So it's like that big piece of imposter syndrome for me was overcome brick by brick by brick by brick, with people just aligning. And now I know I have the resources to make the right decisions. And so, imposter syndrome will creep up in new ways, and I think when you're a person who is really striving to achieve and create and build, it would be weird if you didn't get it from time to time. It's like, if you didn't get imposter syndrome, you're probably not trying hard enough, I'm not sure. But that's kind of where I would say, it's a practice and a muscle that you build over time versus a moment in time when suddenly you're like superhero, you know.
Absolutely. And actually, what you said there about not being kind of having the background in health or in biotech. Sanjana's actually asking if you could add a little bit more color in terms of how how you're in this space now without kind of coming from that space. So for anyone who's not kind of in life sciences now, how can they perhaps be a valuable member in that sector?
Yeah. So I did join a fund before I started this fund. I joined a fund where I was just a partner in it, and we were focused in new science and deep technology. So I really did have an opportunity to learn from others. And I think one of the things I've done, there's a few things I've done right in my career. And one of them was just recognize when I have an opportunity and just run with it, because you never really know how long it's going to last. So I was like, I'm going to be a sponge right now. I'm going to learn as much as I can because I have an opportunity, in this moment in time to do that. So I read a lot. I read, journals, science papers. Like when the day was over, the day wasn't over. I was reading, I was learning as much as I could. And I mean, I was starting from square one. In the beginning, I didn't know the difference between a diagnostic and a therapeutic. I was like clueless, and so I had to learn these things. And I was very open with the people around me, not only that I wanted to learn, but that like I didn't know anything. I would take notes constantly. I would look things up later. I, even had some textbooks around, and I think it helped also not coming from that industry, because I hadn't had years and years and years of medical education and residency or whatever that might be to ingrain a certain way of thinking in me. So I had to learn what's allowed and what's not allowed in the industry, but then maybe where are the lines that don't get crossed because people don't cross them because you just don't. And what if we did, and that was where I could become valuable to the team. So it took, many years to learn where the lines are and what they are, and, how to not cross them or have a sense of what they might be. But so I would say it was an investment in, dedicating myself to the space and learning it, and finding the people around me who would be willing to teach me.
Yeah, that's great. And Didem, this question is actually for you. So Sanjan is asking, in your experience, how do you detach yourself from a startup that you believe truly adds value, but it's just not the right time for it?
Yeah. I mean, I guess being in venture capital, the other day I used an analogy, it's almost like being a doctor. If you're falling in love with, emotionally in love with all of your patients all the time, you kind of can't give the tough love or the service that you're supposed to be able to do. So there has to be a way to compartmentalize. And again, at that point, it's, one is coming from a place of tough love and giving feedback where feedback needs to be given, and then being able to be clear and explicit and move on. I think honesty, again, being responsive and being honest and creating that environment of trust is really important. So, but it's not easy. It is not easy, because you do fall in love with your entrepreneurs. You fall in love with the companies, the ideas, the teams, and all of it, and you want the best for them. But being able to give them that feedback, the robust feedback that they need to be able to grow their business, pivot their business, etc., is actually the definition of what you're doing. I mean, that's the reason for existence practically.
Andreas is asking if you could share an experience that had a lasting impact on you while connecting with an LP and kind of going through that whole negotiation with them.
I'll share one.
Yeah.
So when we were doing our initial closing, it was, a while ago, and it feels like a long time ago, but it wasn't really. And we had, of course, what Adeo likes to call LP love going on. So, we had this investor who was like, committing and making all these promises, and, we went through a whole process with them, getting them, getting the documents done and, all the terms completed, and design the fund basically kind of around their anchor check and all of this stuff like that. And they never wired. So I had a really difficult, decision to make, because at that point we didn't have enough other individual investors in order to complete the closing. Because I had put a lot of, almost all my eggs in that basket. And I had to, so here we were at closing, it had all fallen apart. And I had to kind of say to myself, like, are you doing this or are you not doing this? And it was time, it was a moment in time when I had to do it for real. And so, picking myself up by my bootstraps, and getting out there. Couple months later, we had enough circle to do the closing, but it was a really tough lesson. And that was also some hard and frank conversations that I had to have with that LP. I had kind of put them on a pedestal in a way, like, oh, they're this like really important guy in the industry. And, really everyone oohed and awed when they found out who they were, and, that they were involved in our fund. And I had to really examine what in me is so inclined to put this person on a pedestal. And, it's really easy as a fund manager starting a fund to fall for the LP love that Adeo calls it. So I'm not gonna fault anyone for falling a little bit into that trap, but it was a big growth opportunity for me to look at that and try to figure out why I felt that this person was more powerful than I was. And the lesson, we still have an amicable relationship, but I'll never accept them as an LP ever again unless they wired 100% of the funds.
Funded everything.
Yeah. But one of the things that I discovered, interestingly, and this is part of the imposter syndrome being overcome over time, is, I don't want to put this sounds blunt, but I've learned over the past maybe year and a half that I'm actually more powerful than he is. And I am more resilient than he is. And I have, been able to continue forward and do this. And, I've been able to achieve things that I didn't think I would achieve, and that I know other people didn't think I would be able to achieve. And that that was important to me when I saw subtly the tables begin to turn between us, and he began to seek mentorship from me. And I was like, this is an interesting moment. I really have grown, and it's not like, like a boom moment. It's just, you see that over time. So I would say that was a big personal growth and development opportunity with an LP. Yeah.
That's really powerful. Didem, what about you?
I'm going to tag along to the previous question as well. So someone had asked about compartmentalizing, and there are so many different archetypes of LPs as well. And of course, when you first start on your journey, you start off with your closest confidants, people who know you and who are most likely going to invest in you because they believe in you, they know you, and that's relatively a straightforward conversation. And then you go to colleagues, and then you go to industry experts, and then you go to like the bigger fish, etc. So you keep growing these radians of people that you're tackling, and you're gaining momentum along the way. So the first LPs, then that they provide you stories for the next LPs, etc. So there's this like momentum building energy that you get. But at the end of the day, you're always addressing somebody at a moment in time, and it's not necessarily about you, it's about them. So like, no matter what you're trying to do, they're going through a divorce, they're putting twins through college, they promised their wife they'd buy a new summer home. Like, it could be a bazillion reasons why they at that moment may or may not be able to invest, and you kind of have to compartmentalize that too. And it's not necessarily, again, about you, it's about where they are. So being able to deal with that is also actually made the process easier. Like I was getting so emotionally wrapped up in, what these people, their response was a reflection on me, but actually it's not necessarily a reflection on me. 99% of it is where they are at that moment in time for themselves.
Yeah.
I love that. And Didem, Genevieve, we're reaching the top of the hour. So I just want to close on one last kind of very rapid question for everyone here. And it's inspired by Sanjana, and Sanjana, well done, because you asked very good questions. You had the most of these questions were from you. But in 2 words, what change would you like to bring in the VC space specifically for women?
I will
Okay.
answer that first. I think, I could be very generic and I could say, I want to create opportunities for women or access or a pipeline. And those are things, yes, 100%. And we need, but I would say, I saw VC like a couple of years back as being this very exclusive club of people that you couldn't really get into. And in many ways it still is that. And, being part of VC Lab has helped a lot with my perception that this isn't a world that I can be in and I don't belong here. But that being said, I think that the mindset that I always kind of saw around VC was not of collaboration, not of community. And to me, that ultimately means it's a mindset of lack. If I receive a deal, or if I receive an investor, or if I receive something, that means that you don't. And I don't think that is true or is healthy for women. I think we as women we're multipliers. And we're creators, and we are not designed to operate in these constricted little boxes of have not and lack. And so I thought about, who do I want to be as an investor, and what am I ultimately doing? And I think what we are ultimately doing is we are conduits of abundance. And so if we become that, and the most direct way to be a conduit of abundance is to raise a fund and invest that money into companies. But there are so many other ways to be that. And if we can be that conduit and epicenter of abundance and opportunity, we're going to lift up other women, because that's how women operate. And by doing so, we're going to bring men and, create equity, which is ultimately what we're looking for. So that's what I would say would be the world that I want to create.
I love that. Abundance, conduit. Love it. Didem, what about you?
2 words: sisterhood and intention. I think that wherever your intentions are, and your energy goes there, that's where something manifests. As venture capital shifts from being an alternative investment vehicle to becoming more of a mainstream investment vehicle, and as micro funds start becoming more of the norm, I think that the whole idea of having some type of venture capital activity in your portfolio of investments for everyone is going to become much less alternative, much more mainstream, let's say. In that equation, I think women need to start playing a role there too. So if we can create an intention around having more female LPs and more female fund managers, and then a sisterhood to support each other through this abundance mindset of sharing deals, sharing opportunities, sharing lessons learned, etc. We'll get there.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much both for being so generous with your time, with your experiences, vulnerabilities, advice. This was amazing. Truly, I think you created a very magical space for everyone here. So thank you. Thank you everyone for showing up, and we'll see you at the next event.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming.